Hi everybody and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be learning how to use verb to be in Portuguese, and we're going to have some examples with famous people in Brazil so that you can have a little bit of an understanding of the verb and also learn a little bit about the culture as well. We're talking about the present tense, and we're going to learn how to use affirmative and negative sentences using the verb to be. So let's do it. Let's get started. When we use the verb to be, usually we use it in two different ways. The first one is to talk about temporary circumstances, and the second is to talk about permanent circumstances. In languages like Portuguese, we have two separate verbs to indicate temporary and permanent circumstances. In English, you have one verb, which is to be. In Portuguese, we have two verbs, estar, which is the temporary one, and ser, which is the permanent type of use of the verb to be in Portuguese. So we would use verbo ser to talk about things that are permanent in our lives. When you want to say your name or where you come from, you would use this verb. Not, for example, I'm hungry, which would be a temporary circumstance in which you'd use the verb estar. And we'll talk about verb estar at another video. So for today, we'll be sticking with verb ser, which is the permanent use of verb to be. Let's start with the personal pronouns and the conjugation that comes along with the verb. The personal pronouns in Portuguese are eu, tu, ele, ela, nós, vós, eles, elas. Eu means I, tu means you, ele, he, ela, she, nós, we, vós, you, eles, they, elas, they. Differently from English, which uses they for both plural, masculine and feminine, in Portuguese, you would need to use eles to indicate plural of masculine content, and elas a plural of feminine content. That could be a group of women or a group of men, and they would say eles or elas. Or if it's, let's say you're talking about fruits that are in feminine context, for example, apple is a feminine word in Portuguese, is maçã, and if you're talking about many apples, you would use elas. And let's say that you're talking about cars, the word car in Portuguese is a masculine word. You would say, if you have a group of cars, you'd say eles, okay? Another use for the pronoun they, eles, the masculine version, is when you talk about groups in general. So even if you have, for example, women and men together, you will say eles to talk about the general group. Or if you have a mix of masculine and feminine objects together, you would still use eles to refer to the plural they in general. Now that we've covered the pronouns, I need to touch on tu and vós. Normally in Brazil, we don't really use tu and vós very often. There are certain cities in Brazil where you use tu more often than in other places. So for example, if you go to Rio or Recife, which is in the Northeast, or if you go to the southern part of Brazil, to Porto Alegre, and probably in other parts of Brazil, but at least these three places, it's more common to use tu to refer to someone, to talk to you, than you would be in other cities of the country. So você is another common word, very common word, to use when you refer to a person, right? You're talking to someone, you can say você. And you're seeing the little hat on top of the letter E, that makes the closed sound E, você, okay? When we say vocês as a plural for you plural, you all, is the same situation. Your group of people, and you're talking to them, right? You all, you would be vocês. Voz is definitely not common in spoken Portuguese. You can definitely find it in text if you're reading literary texts or things that are more traditional. You will find voz more often. So just make sure that if you ever find this word, it is probably going to be in literary text, not necessarily in conversations. Now let's go for the conjugation. If I want to say I am, I'll say eu sou. Eu sou. You are, you're going to say tu és or você é. When you use você, you're going to use é, okay? Which is the verb we use for third person singular. Even though we are talking about second person singular. Because we're using você, you're not going to say você és, because és is in direct reference to tu. Tu és. Você é. That makes it easier because then you just need to memorize é, and you know you're going to be using é when you say você, ele, or ela. Listen to the pronunciation of ele. Ele. It's a closed E. Ela is an open E. Ele, ela, é. Okay? Nós, which is we. Nós somos. We are. Nós somos. Vocês são. Whenever you see this little thing here on the top of a letter, you're going to make a nasal sound. You're going to speak through your nose. Okay? Vocês são. It's a nasal sound. The agudo, which we saw in a previous lesson, agudo opens the sound. The little hat closes the vowel sound, and the tio makes it nasal. So here we have é, e, okay? É, e, Vocês são. I'm not teaching voice necessarily because, as I told you, it's not very common in conversations. But if you say that, it would be vós sois. Vós sois. But definitely not very common. Vocês são is much more common. And the third person plural, eles são, elas são. Because the plural ends with S and the conjugation starts with S, you can just combine those sounds together and say eles são, eles são. Same thing with elas são, elas são. You just combine S and S. Okay, you can do that. Let's go to the affirmative use of the verb to be. Here we have a picture of a very famous singer in Brazil. Her name is Ivete Sangalo. And we're going to use verb to be to talk about her. Okay? So in this sentence, we're saying she is Ivete Sangalo. And then you can say ela é Ivete Sangalo. Ela é Ivete Sangalo. This is another very popular singer in Brazil. His name is Luan Santana. So if I want to say he is Luan Santana, ele é Luan Santana. Ele é Luan Santana. This is a very famous actress. Her name is Thaís Araújo. And again, you can see here the accent that opens the sound. In case of the letter I, there is not much to open, but it makes the sound stronger. So it brings the attention to that vowel, makes that vowel the strongest vowel in a word. So here you would pronounce the letter I with strength, the same way with the letter U, with strength because the accent is on top of it. Ela é Thaís Araújo. Ela é Thaís Araújo. This is a singer from Brazil as well, and you can look them up later if you want and hear their songs. This is Nando Reis, and if I want to say he is Nando Reis, I just need to say ele é Nando Reis. Ele é Nando Reis. Let's now talk about negative sentences. When we use negative to say someone is not or someone does not, we use the adverb não. In this case, Ele não é Luan Santana, ele é Caio Castro. And Caio Castro is a very famous actor in Brazil as well. So if you can see here, I'm using, in English you would have he is not, so the not would be after. In Portuguese, you flip it and you put the not first, and then you have the verb come after, the main verb. So you have ele não é Luan Santana. And as you can see, the word não. The T here on top, once again, nasal sound, não. Same thing here. Ela não é Ivete Sangalo. Ela é Cláudia Raia. And Cláudia Raia is a very famous actress in Brazil. Alright, now we're gonna go for the plural. Eles não são o Legião Urbana. Legião Urbana is a band from Brazil. They are not Legião Urbana. Eles são o Fundo de Quintal. And Fundo de Quintal is a samba type of band, so you should check them out, they're great. Eles não são. And here I have two words with a nasal sound. Não são o Legião Urbana, eles são o Fundo de Quintal. Alright, the last one. Eu não sou Mariana Rio. Eu sou Paula. In this case, I am using I am not, I am. Eu não sou, eu sou. E você? Tell down in the comments below who you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!